Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The unbeaten American heavyweight Christopher Lovejoy claims he's on the verge of fighting Trevor Bryan in what would be Trevor Bryan's first defense of his WBA interim heavyweight title, which he won in 2018, beating a faded BJ Flores, has not been cited since. And so Lovejoy, he spoke to the Boxing Voice in quite a long interview, and there was quite a bit of detail that he went into, that he's been speaking to Don King just last night, as he said, and that King was about to send him some training camp money. So this fight, if it's to go ahead, is to be on the Tank Davis and Leo Santa Cruz undercard, which is a pay-per-view event on October the 24th. So I'll just get to my notes now, because Lovejoy, the way that he was talking about it, it was a certainty, and you'd have to imagine that if this is a title fight and the WBA sanction this, because remembering at the moment, at the time of this video, Lovejoy is not ranked, but he said it wouldn't be a problem. But you'd have to imagine this would be a decent payday for Lovejoy, something he's been seeking and craving, clearly calling for on social media. And remembering, Lovejoy has effectively made his bones in the heavyweight division, mostly on social media, being a very good self-promoter. His record, 19-0, 19 knockouts, but it's all been done in Tijuana. Behind closed doors, it is effectively a very padded record. He's only fought one guy with a winning record. So there's a couple of issues that I have with this fight, but also there's some perception issues for the winner, because there's a couple of questions we've got about both guys, but I'll get to that very shortly. But what I want to first do is go through a couple of his statements just to set the scene and the context. But he is saying that this fight is going ahead, that he is going to be fighting Trevor Bryan, and that people should check the WBA rankings when they're next updated. He said inside the next couple of weeks, and they do typically update their rankings at the end of each month. So Lovejoy, he has been ranked by the WBA a few times before. So he is saying he's going to be re-entered. He said he's going to be top 8. And he will be fighting Trevor Bryan, that he's talked to Don King. He's supposed to send him some camp money. And effectively, he's going to have a training camp for that fight, which see here on screen. So he posted this on his social media to his Instagram story, saying 94 days out. So obviously to the fight date that he's expecting to happen. And he'd previously, and this is a day before the video went out, posted this, saying, at WBA 100. So clearly something is happening behind the scenes, and he's being maneuvered into position to fight someone by the looks of it. And he is saying Trevor Bryan, the number 1 rated contender in the WBA and also the WBA's interim champion. But he spoke about once this fight is all signed off, because he's going to get the contract, sign it, yada, 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 he'll have a training camp. He said that Malik Scott is probably going to be his trainer for the camp, his head trainer, and he believes he'd be able to get the likes of his friend Johnny Rice, who's another heavyweight in the division. He's actually a decent heavyweight, and he thought he may be able to also get Charles Martin as a sparring partner. But he was very confident that this fight is going to go ahead, and he said he's going to knock Trevor Bryan out. He's going to take his spot, and then he's going to go into a bigger and better fight, which will also pay him bigger and better money as a result. Later on in the interview, and I'll just cover this off quickly, he spoke about Guido Vianello. There's been a bit of back and forth between Lovejoy and Sam Jones, Vianello's manager, about a potential fight with one of his heavyweights, either Vianello or Joe Joyce. He still believes that fight could still go ahead, potentially in Italy. But getting back to the sort of Trevor Bryan, Christopher Lovejoy, I mean, at the moment, this sort of fight in the heavyweight division, it's not exactly a massive high-profile fight, but part of that is because that Lovejoy and Bryan are unknown quantities in the heavyweight division. And that's no disrespect to either guy, but Lovejoy's been fighting off TV in Tijuana. No one really knows how good he is, but it's also the same for Trevor Bryan. who picked up that strap a couple of years ago against a faded former cruiserweight in Flores. A fight no one asked for that interim title to be on the line, but it was, and he hasn't been sighted in the ring since. And he had been campaigning in obscurity as well. And the three guys that he fought before Flores had, over 70 collective losses. So we have an issue here with these guys where this will be a title fight, but no one really knows how good they are. Both of them. The champion, people really haven't seen him fight, don't know how good he is. Supposedly he is a decent heavyweight. Christopher Lovejoy, even, less known about him and how good he is, except he has a horribly padded record. Only one guy on his record's got a winning record. He's only fought twice in the past 2 years as well, so it's not like we have a lot of form to go on, but the guys he has been fighting have been extremely low level. And as I say, he's made his reputation in the heavyweight division, mostly on social media. He's been calling everyone out. He's managed to get some good headlines for himself, and it's probably something that's propelling him actually into this fight with Trevor Bryan, because I'll just double check on BoxRec. So at the moment, Christopher Lovejoy is rated by BoxRec as world number 419 in the world at the time of this video being recorded. And that speaks to a poor level of opposition. And then you have Trevor Bryan, who at the moment, because of his inactivity, doesn't actually hold, a BoxRec ranking. But, before, when he was, in that year period where he would have a ranking on BoxRec, he was, somewhere between 40 and 60 bouncing around. So a guy like Bryan, who's been calling himself a heavyweight champion, beat a faded BJ Flores and all manner of journeymen before that. Yeah, how good are these guys? And this is a problem in the heavyweight division today, that often some of these guys can go so far in their careers. Trevor Bryan, 20-0. We've barely seen him. We hardly know how good he is, except we know he's got some power and apparently got some skills. He, from all reports, can fight, but we haven't seen him in a good fight, and that's a problem. So what happens for the winner here? How much credit can we really give them? Because if Bryan beats Lovejoy, well, so what? We can just say, well, Christopher Lovejoy was a hype job. And if Lovejoy beats Bryan, we can probably say the reverse. So it is one of these things that, the winner will only get so much credit from this fight based on the poor level of opposition that they both fought before. It is an issue. And do we need to see that fight? Do we want to see that fight? It's, whatever happened to Trevor Bryan versus Manuel Char to, so-called unify the regular title and the interim belt. That fight was meant to happen earlier this year, seems to have just sort of drifted off into the ether. Char's been calling out Andy Ruiz Jr., and there's been reports he might fight, an MMA guy at some point later this year. I mean, how much stock we can put into some of these reports is unclear, but Lovejoy, the way he was talking, and the certainty and the level of detail. He said he'd already had a chunk of money from Don King, but he was going to get more for a training camp, and he went into real detail about what he was going to do. So for him, he's saying this is a dead cert. I mean, who wins and how? It's a bit unclear. I mean, I guess maybe based off the Flores fight, maybe you would say Trevor Bryan, as the so-called champion, goes in the favorite, but it's against a guy we know very little about. Facing another guy we know very little about. It really is a strange situation. And in the age of social media, where you have coverage galore of all manner of boxing fights, there's very little floating around on both these guys. So they could go into a world title fight and basically, fans are mostly blind heading into it. So there is some interest from that perspective, but it's also a bizarre situation. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.